Okay, welcome back. We have a couple more examples of solving by factoring. Again, remember to solve by factoring, our equations must first be equal to 0. This equation is. Now as we look at this, we say, oh wow, this doesn't look like much of anything I've ever factored. Until we recognize that there's a common factor. We can pull an x out of each piece. Again, I encourage you to, as you're doing these problems, you've seen some examples, so you may want to pause the video and try it out yourself. And so we pull out the common factor of an x, and then almost as a little surprise, we now have something that we hopefully can recognize. We have a two-term polynomial, it's a difference, and we check, yes, they are in fact both squares. So we can factor this as a difference of squares. Okay, so now we have it factored. Our zero factor property originally only described two things, but the whole idea works. If you have 5 things being multiplied to be 0, one of them would have to be 0. Whereas we have here 3 things that are being multiplied to be 0. The only way that could be true is if one of those 3 things is 0. So that leaves us with x equals 0. So we have one solution already. 2x plus 1 equals 0, which we'll solve in a moment. And 2x minus 1 equals 0. So 2x plus 1 equals 0. We subtract 1 from both sides. Alright, and then we can divide both sides by 2 to get x by itself. We get x equals negative 1/2. 2x minus 1 equals 0. We can add the 1 to both sides and get 2x equals 1. And then divide both sides by 2 to get our third answer, x equals 1/2. So this time we actually get 3 answers, and this is generally what you're going to see. The highest exponent on x is your number of possible answers. Now sometimes you may have an answer get repeated, but that's generally a guide to how many answers you're going to have. So here we have 3 different answers: 0, negative 1/2, and positive 1/2. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so here we have example 2, 5x squared plus 70x equals negative 245. To solve this equation, we want to get it equal to 0 first. So very first step is let's bring the 245 over. And so we have it equal to 0 now. And then we begin to try and factor. Now, you may recognize really quickly that, hey, I have a common factor of 5. Because this is an equation, you actually have 2 options here. You can factor out the 5, or again, because it's an equation, you actually could divide the whole equation by 5 and just get rid of the 5. Now, you can't do that with a variable. Variable you have to factor out, like we did in the example before, but if it was just a number, you could divide both sides of the equation by that number. I'm actually going to choose to factor the common factor out because there is something I want to point out in this example. So I take the 5 out of everything. And so we get the equation x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 0. Alright, and then we look at what's left. Now we have a polynomial that has nothing in front of the squared term. So we look for things that multiply to be 49 and adds to be 14. The 2 numbers in this case would be a positive 7 and a positive 7. So we actually have a factor being repeated here. Now you have a product equal to 0. There's 3 things in that product, but one of those is an actual number. That number can't be 0. Unlike the problem before where that third thing involved a variable, where that could be 0. The variable could make that 0, but that's a 5. It's never going to be 0. So then we have x plus 7 equals 0, and again x plus 7 equals 0. Because you have that repeated factor, you actually get a repeated answer So negative 7 you get as an answer twice. Well, when you write an answer down, you only need to write it down the one time. And so here we get the answer, just the one answer of x equals negative 7. Okay, so hopefully these videos help you out as you're solving equations by factoring. In our next topic, we're going to be looking at some applications of solving equations, solving these polynomial equations. Until then.